Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee McKenna. I'm a therapist, shamanic healer, and also a parent. And I'm here with the third of our 10-part series on spiritual parenting with Sean Murphy, who is a spiritual consultant, also a parent, and author of the 4-part book series, Torn Between Two Worlds. And today we're going to talk about the principle in parenting of attitude over aptitude. And if you enjoy this series, please like and subscribe. And welcome, Sean.
It's a pleasure to be here today, Renee. This is a topic that I really like to talk about, related to both my childhood and my daughter's childhood.
Well, why don't you get us started? Attitude over aptitude.
Yes, yeah. I go back to a story when I was in high school. I had a very high mathematical and logical aptitude, and I used to sit in my math class with my desk turned to the back. And I'm an auditory learner, so I didn't have to look at the board. But the teacher would always get mad at me, and he would write a problem on the board, and he'd say, "Sean, can you answer that?" And I would just answer it because he was talking as he was writing, and he'd get so mad. But and it was boring for me, because my aptitude was much higher than the rest of the class. Mm-hmm. And I had a bad attitude. I had nobody pushing me in a direction where I could have learned a whole lot more. So when I entered university with honors math, after taking honors math for 2 years, the other kids in the class were saying, "Well, this is new." And for me, everything from day one was new because I never pushed myself. Mm-hmm. So everybody has different aptitudes that they're gifted with in this life. And a very good friend of mine is a very successful asset manager. And he said to me once, if I spend all of my time working on my weaknesses, the best I'll ever be is mediocre. But if I spend the same amount of time, or I use that time to work on my aptitudes, my strengths, I can be extraordinary. And I think that's a goal we need to set for our children, is to help them find magic or extraordinary experiences in their lifetimes as children. And building on their aptitudes is the best way to do that. And not forcing them to do things not forcing them to do too many things that they're bad at, but give them the opportunity to really shine with the aptitudes that they have.
So I think it reminds me of the idea of multiple intelligences. And a lot of times, particularly with our very academic, school-based cultures, that we lose sight of things that are intelligences outside of math and science and English and maybe even sports, right? And this idea that we do all have gifts to bring to the world, as humble or as extraordinary as those might be. And that people can have musical aptitude, they can have social aptitude or emotional aptitude. Some people are amazing with animals or plants. There are so many mechanical things, right? I think that it's really important as parents to expand beyond this, like getting an A and impressing your teacher, giving back what the system wants from you to get these grades, particularly for children that have struggled with that. And to really, for us as parents, to observe and help the children discover and then nourish those things that are natural gifts of them. And, particularly relationality and spirituality and caring for other things are aspects that a lot are underdeveloped or underappreciated, I should say, as important skills, right? We need people that are willing to be able to care for their friends or care for their children or care for the animals or care for the plants. And I mean, that's just one aspect of caring, and then there's, of course, like the mechanical aspect of people that may not have anything to be able to do with dogs and aren't crazy about people. But if you sit them in front of a car engine or a microwave or some kind of coding, like they really get into it. So how do we as parents support and notice those aptitudes of our children and appreciate them, particularly when they don't agree with things that we might value?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important question to ask. When you were talking, I was thinking of the work of Dr. Mel Levine, who wrote the book All Kinds of Minds.
Mm-hmm.
And in an academic environment, if your aptitudes are in the things that you just mentioned, outside of the academic space, he would say that you have a child going to school with a toolbox with his aptitudes in it, and he's got to leave his toolbox at the door. And while the children with academic aptitudes, academic strengths, they get to take their toolbox in the schoolhouse. So that's a situation that many parents face. We have children who have aptitudes in music and in creative areas that the school doesn't recognize. And we have to, help bridge that gap, help find a way for them to experience success with their gifts, with their aptitudes, so that they can bear working on their schoolwork. Is essentially what it is, right? That they have the energy, the positive energy that they're getting from joy of success in their with their aptitudes, to overcome the negatives. Finding where a child has aptitudes, there's a lot of different ways for that. There's a lot of testing that's being done nowadays, and I just recommend to parents, if you do some of these assessments for your children, don't focus on the negatives. Don't focus on the things they can't do. Focus on the things that they're good at.
Yeah.
And if as you said, if I don't know as a parent anything about the area that my child knows about, the best thing I can do is become a cheerleader and find them the right coach, to do it, and not just let them do it, but push them to do it. You're good at this. We'll get you the right coach to help you with it, and we'll be behind you the whole way. So, originally the SAT tests were standard aptitude tests. Today they're standard knowledge tests, but they're less about aptitudes. So there are better ways to figure out what people's aptitudes are, and I think parents and family members can help point out what the children are good at. And it may be scary if they're good at computer games. It may be scary, but people make a lot of money making computer games. The point that many people make is that when we go out to hire somebody, we're not going to hire them for their generalist skills. We're going to hire them for their strengths. And you don't need to be able to do everything in the job that you're going after, because you have other people who can do the accounting, who can do the administrative side. And so why do we force our children to learn all those things that maybe they won't ever do, because they won't ever be good enough to do that. They won't become an accountant, but they may hire accountants in their life to do that work for them.
I think about my dear friend Rose, who's one of 6 children and the only girl with 5 brothers. And each of the boys in the family had something they were good at, and different things too. One of them is a professional comedian. Another one actually became a semi-pro baseball player. And then when he stopped doing that, he started his own baseball club, which has trained hundreds of boys. One of them is a science teacher. And she fell through the cracks because she's a compassionate, very femininely oriented relational person. And she always thought she was stupid because she didn't do well in school in the traditional way. And so it has really been in her adulthood that she was able to find the things that she's good at. And certainly she found that in her work, and she became a nurse, and she's an incredible nurse, and really continues to come into her own, even in her 60s, of really appreciating her loving kindness as her superpower, and how much her patients appreciate her loving kindness as one of the most grounded and compassionate healing forces in the units that she's involved in. But beyond that, to really value that in her life, right? A lot of times as parents, we're focused on getting the kids to get a job so that they can be self-supporting, and this idea of what do you do? And that becomes identified with who you are as a person. And for her, it's been really affirming and healing to realize that this is her gift in life, and she has a huge community of friends, and she's very involved with her family and her child, and that this is really her gift, that she was gifted, that brings her joy and fulfillment. And that's also the gift that she brings to others, even though she may not have ever done well in math or in writing or those kind of things, right? So appreciating, and I think as parents, it's really important to recognize that parenting is an opportunity for us to grow and heal in our own self too, right?
Yes.
And so, we're often motivated to do things for our children that we wouldn't do for ourselves. And to apply that expansion of being willing to see what's good and what the talents or gifts are of the children, and to expand that repertoire to really be able to apply it to ourselves, because many parents come right up against their own issues just with the genetics and the epigenetics of their kid, who may have a learning challenge just like they did, or may have social challenges or different challenges. And to be open to treat your child and hold them in a different light than maybe you were held, or even the way that you hold yourself, to be able, but I know for myself that a lot of the growth for me as a parent has in what I wanted to give to my children and provide for them, that I didn't feel was provided for me, has really been incredibly healing, because it's shifted my relationship with myself too.
Yes. No, what you said about your good friend is kind of a shame, because the society doesn't necessarily, in youth, celebrate the helping hand type of child, right? The one who is kind of holds a team together, the one who's really supportive and helps everybody, but doesn't necessarily have a skill of their own other than that skill to
Right.
to help people, to motivate people, to support them. My daughter is a person like that, and she's an empath and was able to help people out and make them better people. But we as a society don't see that as a real skill. But as you said, it's unfortunately, leads to professions that society also undervalues nurses and teachers, and the ones who are doing such important work, but society undervalues them, I think.
Well, I think that's where us as spiritual parents can value beyond money, right? Or
Yeah.
the overculture. And I'm thinking about a client that I worked with recently who's a mother of adult children and is struggling with her very successful on the outside, financially successful, business successful, very extroverted, world traveling adult daughter. And she, the mother, also the father who's now dead, her husband was a very extroverted businessman and created a wonderful life for them. And she's an introvert. And she's an amazing artist. She creates beautiful food, and the home is probably one of the most beautiful. I've happened to have been to her home, the most beautiful homes that I've ever been in. And she's like the rock, but a very, rocks are quiet, right? And she makes decisions slowly, and she's methodical, and she's very stable, unlike, this energy that's really, really, again, valued in extroversion. There's a beautiful book, Quiet, that talks about the value of introverts and how, probably 50% of us are that. A lot of us are a mix, right? I'm an extreme on both ends. And how to be able, I've been really encouraging and coaching and working with her relationship with herself in valuing her introvert gifts and what she has brought in making room for other people, in being more of a cooperative person, rather than a driver, more about keeping the peace than about confronting everybody. And we were really talking about this dynamic with her daughter, who wants her mother to be more like her. She's actually said to her, like, because her daughter's actually doing all this personal growth work. She's like, I need you to be, a stronger force in my life. I need you to be X, Y, and Z, which are really the attributes she values in herself.
Yeah.
And the work for the mother, as with all of us, has been to really be herself, not to be different than that, and to value the uniqueness, and the quieter strengths and offerings that she brings. And that attitude over aptitude, like I think for many, the undervalued gifts are more attitudinal than aptitudinal, right? So, things, aptitude tends to be things that are measured and, they're good at this or whatever. But for many people, their gift to the world is, and to those in their life, is their attitude. And
Yeah.
to value the attitudes over, or at least equally with the aptitudes.
Well, in society and in businesses, it requires both, right? It requires, I mean, you typically say you have finders, grinders, and minders in your business.
Define
And
those. That's a great line.
well, the finders are the salespeople, the grinders are the analysts, and the minders are the ones who hold it all together,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so having those stable people within your organization, because your salesmen are one type and the analysts are another type, but people have to hold that together
Mm-hmm.
and hold the culture together. So yes, and it's sometimes forgotten as really a skill, of just being present and being available for the other people who are important for the business. Because without the minders, businesses fly apart a lot of times.
I think that really speaks to spiritual values and the things, whether we go to church or, have our own spiritual communities or even just our own practice, that it really is the root, the area of spirituality is really about attitude, right? And all of the
Yes.
the teachings that we got that we need to remember, that we need to be reminded about, that we need to have repeated, are about these attitudes, right? Of love and generosity, selflessness, forgiveness, self-awareness, awareness of others, like those are the attitudes. And certainly they can be aptitudes, but they're less measurable. And how do we value our own attitude also as parents too? Because I think a lot of times we're so used to measuring things in the physical world that we can lose sight of the metaphysical that is its partner, right? And so our attitudes toward our children, rather than our skills, if we might not be a great cook or a great housekeeper or whatever we think we're great at, which is often measured through the aptitudes of our children. A lot of people feel like, oh, if my child is not measuring some measurement on some other scale, that somehow I'm inadequate and responsible for their own uniqueness, right? As opposed to valuing our attitudes, and like we're talking about, to cultivate the attitudes of love and unconditional acceptance and real presence with our kids and valuing them. Those, I think, are more important than how much money we make or how fancy our house is.
Yes, that's true. When you look at aptitudes, you'll find, and I've seen this in studies on geniuses, you'll find if you take a group of geniuses, the bandwidth of abilities between those geniuses is just as big as it is for, the entire population. So the attitude is so important with people working at a very high level. They need to be comfortable with people who are better than them, aptitudinally, right? But pushing themselves to find their limits and being happy that they found their limits. That happens in sport. If you find your limit, and instead of putting yourself down because you're not as good as somebody else, your limit is your limit, and you've pushed yourself to your limit. You found it, and that's an accomplishment. You can't measure yourself against somebody else who might have a higher aptitude, longer legs, might have an advantage over you.
Well, this is part of the wisdom development. Again, the more spiritual approach, which is about becoming a holistic person. And, the word humble is often, I have my favorite definition of humility is not about being smaller. It's actually about being right-sized. It's knowing who we are. It's knowing actually what's good about me and knowing what my challenges are and being able to make room for all of them rather than trying to hide or feel ashamed or have some expectation that I'm supposed to be a superhero. And can we extend that to ourselves and to our children? I think about my son, who is on a couple of different spectrums and is incredible at math, and also has his own speed reading abilities. He's an amazing reader. But still, even in his 20s, struggles to tie his shoes and some other basic skills that are just like hand-eye coordination has always been a challenge for him, although he's really good at video games. And that's one of the things, just to say this about video games, that as I looked at it and was a little horrified as my son was like, this was like his thing, I realized that he was having a lot of social issues in school because reading social cues is not one of his skills, although he's taking his intelligence now as a young adult and he's actually aiming it toward learning social skills in this almost intellectual academic way. Like he's reading books about how to be socially successful and and it's really working well for him, I have to say. But he couldn't do that until this place in his development. But earlier, when there was a lot of social issues, he'd spent a lot of time on video games, and I realized it was because he was really good at them. And it was something that he could feel good at, that was giving him, kind of immediate rewards of like, you're good at this. And if you practice this, you can get good at this. And it is something that we've talked about since then. It's like, oh, you're able to focus on something and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until you get good at it. And can we take that template and use that in other areas? And that's been a really helpful, I think, perspective for him that he's now using in these other areas as well.
Okay. You made a very good point about your son, using his abilities in reading to overcome a weakness. And that's what is so important for us, to help our children to use their strengths to overcome their weaknesses. I talk about, my daughter, when she was very young, she joined the choir, and because she loved to sing, but she struggled with reading. And she overcame her reading issue by singing it. So when you think about, whether it's working in a machine shop or performing on a stage, or, dealing with computer programs, video games, you can learn so much that you need in life through those different activities. You don't have to, Pythagoras taught mathematics through music, because music is mathematical. It's very mathematical. There's many different ways to learn. And I think by exposing our children to their aptitudes, that there's a lot of things they're going to learn by using their aptitudes, things that are going to fulfill their lives and strengthen their lives.
So I have to share this because it feels really important. I had a lot of academic aptitude. School always came easy for me, but there were some really devastating emotional deficits that I had. Tremendous anxiety and depression, which I managed with addictions that made my life really unmanageable. Like I like to say it was like I had a Ferrari that didn't have all its wheels on in the garage. So I had all these possibilities, but I couldn't drive in the world in a way that was sustainable and effective for me. And I had a couple stints at starting different businesses. The businesses failed. And I ended up cleaning houses just to be able to make rent when I was in my late 20s. And it was the most fulfilling work that I had for up until that point in my life. And I ended up doing it for 12 years. I was a housekeeper, and I worked in beautiful environments, and people appreciated my visual organizational skills, and I could use my perfectionism to make sure everything was as perfect as it could be. And people paid me good money, and I got to have a loose schedule that was relaxing. I could talk to my friends on the phone while I was dusting or whatever I was doing. And it was really an amazing experience for me. And to value one of the things it taught me, and I got into Buddhism during that period, which is the idea of just being present and chopping wood and carrying water and living simply, was that I was happy. And, there were people in my life who didn't want to tell people that I was a maid because they thought it was kind of shameful or embarrassing or below me. But I loved that work. And it was actually through listening to podcasts and different things while I was cleaning that I eventually got introduced to mind body healing. And it kind of ended up leading me ultimately to become a therapist and a healer in this totally backwards way, by the exposure that I got while I was cleaning people's toilets. But I think it's important for me. I think the joy And suffering compass is this internal compass that we have, and our joy, our own happiness and fulfillment is what pulls us forward to our own alignment with our own best life. And suffering tells us that something's wrong, and trying to live this standard life of like getting a corporate job, it was miserable for me. I was miserable. And so being open to a unique path, and a creative one that other people might not even think is a good idea, has really been incredibly fulfilling for me. So I got to throw that out there for parents. If you want your kids, think about, do you want them to make a lot of money, or do you want them to be happy? Now, maybe they can have both, but I vote for door number 2.
Yes. One of the tools that I use in my work is helping people find their best stuff. And that is, going through, like you said, your experience that as working as a maid, I got fulfillment out of that work. And these are the reasons, these are the things that were present. And these are the reasons why I got fulfillment out of that work. And going through, you can do this with children also, find out, what was the core activity that gave you fulfillment, and then try and build those pieces into their life so that you have the opportunity to use your organizational skills and to be appreciated for your organizational skills in your lifetime. So you find out where I had joy and fulfillment in my life, and bring those into your life. And you can do that at any age, but it's great that you were able to do it.
And so that's the attitude that we can bring as parents. And I think clarifying that the attitudes and our own values, and what are we imparting, what are we appreciating, what are we nourishing and supporting within our children.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. It's and all the sharing that you did. It's wonderful, inspiring to talking about working in a humble lifestyle and all the joy that brings to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, always great to talk to you, and we will look forward to number 4 of our spiritual parenting series, setting high expectations and letting go of outcomes.
Yes.
So we hope you'll join us next time. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoy the series. And Sean, we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you, Renee. That'll be a good follow-on to this discussion of letting go of the outcomes.
I agree. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.